Hello, everyone from Frankfurt today. Usually I would say it's great to see you, but unfortunately only you can see me. So yeah, I hope there will be some kind of interaction later on during the chat. And until then, I will just talk to my camera and hope I can still convey the message without the hecklers in the first row. So yeah, let's get started. Instrumentation. Short intro about myself. I'm self-employed. I've been developing in PL SQL for 21 years now. I love data modeling since university times. And I'm a member of the DOAC, the German Oracle user group. We're organizing Apex Connect and the DOAC conference and meetups and other things. I'm allowed to carry the Oracle ACE badge, which doesn't mean I'm a guru. It only means I like to talk about the few things that I know. The slides will be available for download later on, so you don't have to do screenshots or take notes. You still can do that, of course. Right, instrumentation. What is it? There was a nice quote I found on the internet, and someone said, yeah, I have an AOL, do you remember that? An AOL friend that says adding lines to code is debug code, and that's bad. Unless you call it instrumentation. In that case, it's good. Quote by Chet Justice, some people might know him. So why should we actually instrument our code? Well, can you, from the top of your head, answer these questions? What are the response times of your system? Where are the bottlenecks? The system seems slower than last week. Why is it? And is it really slower, or just does it appear slower, or well, is it the database at all? Was our refactoring successful? Is the system running faster than before or not? Is it still doing the same things? The main thing is having objective numbers. Otherwise, there's not much point in discussing feelings. Although I know they are important. Of course, the customer needs, or the user needs to feel good. But yes, when measuring performance, it's always good to have concrete numbers. So we come to the conclusion, no matter how you are, who you are, how cool you think you are at programming, you never know exactly what's going on unless you instrument your code. Just shut up and do. I think most of us know Tim Hall, who's the maintainer of the Oracle base website, and I think he's reasonably trustworthy in this case. So there is our code, and we want to know what it is doing, how it's doing it, how long it took, and how much it costs in terms of resources. I found a definition of instrumentation on the Microsoft site, which included code tracing, like informative messages about the execution, debugging, tracking down and fixing programming errors, performance counters, performance thresholds, and event logs. So that's pretty big chunk things that we want to achieve with instrumentation. So that's debugging. Yes, we want to know what it is doing actually, and we want to fix coding errors or logic errors. There's logging, auditing, what happens, what events, what tasks, or sets of tasks. Runtime registration, code tracing, services, client ID, client info, module, $V views, and tracing for the lucky ones with active workload oh no, I always fail on this, active workload repository and active session history. Gosh. You can see that's not usually the tools I'm working with, and there are other talks about AWR and ASH. So the lucky ones can work with that, and the other ones have to cope with the basic things. Yes, and there's metrics collections like CPU and I/O usage, and again, the ASH and AWR information. And why are we doing this? I mean, it seems quite a lot of work, but we're all, well, looking forward to that special moment. I think many of you know this meme, and I still like it. That moment when you prove it's not the database and the problem must be somewhere on your side or on your side. So yeah, so we better get our stuff up and running so we can prove it's not our fault. So just imagine you are convinced you have to do instrumentation and you're telling your colleagues about it. You're fully motivated, and then your colleagues start with, it'll make my code run slower, or this is extra stuff I don't need, or but it will take longer to write. Well, yes, but another but to the but. Yes, well, if they say instrumentation will make the code run slower, maybe we should start taking away the $V views and the tracing in the database, or the all the level traces, the event subsystem in Oracle. Take everything away and see whether it'll really run slower. I mean, would Oracle run faster with all that stuff? Not likely, because this helps us determining where the bottlenecks are and where we can gain performance and where we lose performance. So not a good idea, I guess. Extra stuff I don't need. What about constraints? Check constraints, foreign keys, primary keys, indexes. Shall we just drop them? I mean, maintaining them takes so much time. It's just a hassle, isn't it? I think you can see that these things do make sense, so instrumentation in general might help. Yes, it takes longer to write, but on the other hand, it saves time during development and in production because you know what's going on and you know where to look when something doesn't go well. So I think most of these arguments can be counted. So instrumentation is, as I see it, is the opposite of technical debt. You make a technical investment which will pay off sooner and later. And it usually already pays off during development. And yes, it just, well, you get, yeah, you just do it, you get used to it, and it doesn't take so much extra time when you're used to it. So just go ahead with it. For your convenience, I have looked at 5 open source public domain frameworks, because there's not much in the PL SQL world, open source projects, but there are some. And they are very high quality, which is good news. And I mean, having 5 logging frameworks to choose from is quite good, I think. These 5 are the Instrumentation Library for Oracle, ILO, together with the Oracle Logging Framework, ILOIOLF, I really like this abbreviation, Log for PL SQL, Logger, the PL SQL Instrumentation Toolkit, PIT, and BMC Debug. I think the most famous one is Logger, Log for SQL might ring a bell with Java developers. The other ones are not so famous, but maybe that'll change. So how does the first one, ILO, work? Well, you need to put into the code ILO task begin task and end task. This makes information available in $session. And you need the select any dictionary privilege for it. And when you use ILO timer set mark all tasks interesting, then it writes to the trace file. ILOIOLF, which belongs to it, writes information to a logging table. It sets dynamically sets log levels depending on module, action, instance, user, SID, so very flexible. It uses the query result cache for the config table, so that's really fast. And it has two output modes. One is dbms output, and the other one is writing to a table. So the SQL result cache makes it, yes, the overhead really, really small. And you can change the logging level and enable or disable logging on the fly. So that's, yeah, really convenient. You have global config tables and local config tables. So you can have a global setting and then have your own settings in your own projects. And what does it look like? Here's a small code sample. As I said before, ILO task begin task. There you set module and action, which you might recognize from the $session. Oh, you can't see my mouse, oops. And we have the DB log info that just logs some information to the table. Here's your business code, which is not important in this talk, but usually, of course, the most important bit. Another info and the end task. And of course, never forget to do some cleanup in the exceptions block, ILO task and all tasks. And of course, the raise. I mean, if you don't use the raise, you should have good reasons for it, but I don't think I have to mention that. Next one, Logger. Logger is part of the Aura open source project on GitHub. And yes, an extra tip, you should look at their other projects too, because they are, yeah, they are built from people who actually work in the field. They know what's needed and they chose to share their tools, and yeah, just have a look, see what you can use, and just use it. Logger should be installed in its own schema because it needs to create any context, and it shouldn't have access to your data. So the application schemas should refer to Logger, but not the other way around. And recommendation for production, leave everything in it, but yeah, and set the log level to error, because yeah, the performance overhead is very small. If your DBA for some reason feels the overhead in production, you can have a no-op option, and when you compile it with that, then you will have no overhead at all. But who wants to run production without logging? Don't know. All right. Here's a little example for Logger. We've got a procedure. We've got the scope, which is in this case mainly the procedure name. And we've got the parameters, a type that Logger actually provides. In the beginning, we append the parameters. And when we start logging, we give it some text, like start, the scope, procedure name, and some parameters, the ones that we actually handed to the procedure. your business logic, and in the end, some more logging message. And in the exception case, we just log some horrible drama message, whatever, to raise awareness so someone looks after it. What does it look like? Well, I had to split the rows because they're very wide. We have the text column, start and end. That's the text we put in ourselves. The parameters are logged in the extra column. This is a blob, I think, and everything that exceeds the text field, which is 4,000 characters, is actually put in there. So excess characters and also the parameters in there. Let me just check something. Okay, I can't see the zoom for some, okay. No, nothing in the chat, or is there? I can only see the Q&A, but not the chat anymore. Okay, good. So what else do we see? Timestamp, of course, the scope, procedure name, but you could put in anything like package name, procedure name, some kind of context, anything that helps you. Log level, module, username, call stack, and unit name, SID, line number, and so on. So what I think mainly what you would expect from a normal logging framework. Yes, log4PL/SQL. Java developers might recognize the name log4j. It's quite widespread. The advantage of log4PL/SQL is that we have a lot of output channels. So it's not only table file and DBMS output, but also advanced queuing, some JDBC, JMS, socket, telnet, whatever you want. And what might be a problem is the KSDWRT procedure, because that's a non-documented feature. I'm not sure whether that's still a topic or not, but before you use it, just take this into account. And the next picture is not to shock you, but to show you the general way these logging packages are built. So you don't have to read all the things. I will guide you through it. So here's your PL/SQL application, package A, package B. Here you call plog error, for instance, or plog info, and these calls go to the main plog package. The plog package reads from the configuration table, like the log level, for instance, and it calls the plog interface. And from there, the calls are dispatched to the different output modules. For instance, alert log file or a trace file, standard output, log table, $session, advanced queuing, or via the log4j background process. You can also use other ways of logging. So the only thing after having installed it, what your developer needs to know is how to call the procedures from their packages. The example is very short. You call plog info, just some text, do something. In case of an exception, you just log the error, and this is what it looks like. You have a date, you have the runtime, you have the log level. This is the text that we put in, select raises, blah, blah, blah. And here's our expected error message. And yes, that's very, very basic. You also have some more fields like users, section is there. So yeah, pretty basic, pretty straightforward, I think. No magic here. And then we have PIT. You remember the PL/SQL Instrumentation Toolkit. The advantage is a comfortable Apex application for administration. It uses the util calls tag from 12c onwards. It uses conditional compile to decide which database it's on and then whether to use the util calls tag. You have a message package, which is automatically generated with constants, error numbers, and exceptions, which is very nice and convenient, but it also means you have to think, you have to do a little thinking before you actually start using it. What kind of messages do you want and how to group them, which levels, and so on. So yeah, it makes you think, and that's good. Additionally, if it offers many assert functions, which is also quite useful. Example. A procedure, 2 parameters. When you start a procedure, you say pit enter, give the name and some text. You need, well, you can log the info. You say some message and the message arguments. This is actually the easiest message that you can define. Just one substitution string, #1#, and whatever is put into that parameter will substitute that string. So yes, after we've finished what we're going to do, we say pit leave, and the framework will look after it. And then we call the procedure with 1 integer value and 1 string. And the ones who are still thinking will already know what we will see next. Yes, we get the complete message saying hello to Jan and Hein and Klaas and Pit. And also how long it took. In the Pit log, we get the log ID, the session ID, username, the date, severity, and the message text. And in the call stack, we get the enter and leave information together with the time spent and the CPU used and the elapsed time. The nice thing, as I mentioned, is the administration of PIT, which can be done via an Apex GUI. Doesn't have to, but you can use it. Don't be afraid. The screenshots are in German, but I'm with you. I'll help you. And it can be also installed in English. It's just, that I used the standard parameter when installing it. So, that's why this is in German. So, main screen, 4 menus. First of all, you can administer your messages. You can have all messages in different languages. Here's the Gebubble message that I mentioned. It consists only of this substitution parameter, and it's just an information. This is an error, as you can see by the color, and it says parameter does not exist, and it has 1 substitution string because, yes, obviously you need the name of the parameter. Then you have another screen for changing or editing the output modules. Here you can see that you can log into the Apex error table, which is active. You could use the console, you could use file, you could use mail, and you could write into some PIT table, which is also activated. Here you can change all kinds of parameters. You can define contexts, which define how messages are logged. Here you see PID apex logs severity messages of level 70 into tables. This one logs on the console and the table, and so on and so on. So yes, quite convenient. And you can export all your messages to have them translated, and then you can import them back into the system. So for multi-language usage, that's just perfect. And then we have the last one, BMC Debug. Also a very flexible tool, which offers user session package as input for your logging. It has very good documentations with lots of explanations. So if you're a big beginner in this field, or if you want to work on your own package, which might already exist, that's a good source to look into and read and understand, and maybe just use parts from it. It was put online in 2015 and hasn't been changed since, but well, it just means it's a mature application, and yes, someone is giving this stuff to you for free. This is the last code example, and I think you're starting to recognize how these packages work. I mean, it's more or less always the same. You have some kind of begin call, you can log messages, you can end call, you can handle errors, and yes, you find the information in the tables. And yes, so no surprises here, I guess. Again, time is logged, messages are logged, parameters as you like it. And I think that's exactly what people need. Okay, that was the easy part, I think. We're all familiar with PL SQL coding. So now that was easy. Now comes the nasty stuff, licensing. I will not go into detail, because if you want to use it in your projects, you will have to talk to your company anyway, to the law department, or maybe you already have some guidelines on what you're allowed to use and what you're not allowed to use. All the people who put this online actually want you to use it. I mean, what's the reason for putting it online? So I don't think they will sue you. They chose the license that they thought would fit best. I think it's relatively unlikely that you will be sued, but yeah, as I said, your company compliance might be a little afraid. So let them check the licenses before you use these in an official project. Yes, are these projects alive or not? The ILOIOLF thing was transferred to GitHub in 2018 and hasn't changed a lot since then, but the maintainer is still around on Apex conferences, and he's very accessible, so it's reasonably alive, I think, and you can always change your own things anyway, so that's fine. Log4PL SQL has, well, faded a little. It was it's still on SourceForge, but there's a fork in GitHub that has changes from 2016. You can, well, also fork it and you do your own changes if you need them. Logger is still active. You get very fast responses from the developers. They're always helpful. They're always ready to discuss what your actual needs are, and if you need an extension, or maybe you could do with what's already provided. PID is yeah, I think the last commit was from September 2020, and I just talked to the developer today. He's very fast. He's also quite busy, but if you manage to get him interested in your problem, you can, yeah, always get help, and also extensions to the framework. That's really cool. And BMC Debug, as I said, has been put online 2015. I haven't had contact with the developer, but well, someone who gives away this free must be a nice person. Okay, so what's the conclusion of all this? If you already have some instrumentation in place, that's fine. Maybe you'll find some ideas for extending it. And in that case, it would be good to have a look at the other frameworks too. If you're starting a new project and you just want to install and go, Logger is a good choice. If you have special requirements, as I said, don't know, logging with AQ or whatever, then a Log4PL SQL might be the right way. And if you really want to think about your instrumentation before you actually start and have a very well programmed framework, then go for PIT. And a small solution with an easy start would be BMC Debug. So yeah, just have a look, evaluate them yourself, and yes, have a chat with your colleagues over them, and then decide. Some general recommendations. I just see there's a Q&A. The array statement and the Log4PL SQL example. Oh, did I actually forget something? Probably yes. I can't do it now because we well, have 15 minutes left, I think. But yes, I can put it in the downloads. So, okay. Some general recommendations when you do instrumentations. Yes, wrap your transaction control statements. This is actually coming from our project where we do a quite lengthy transformation of railway data, and we had to do commits and rollbacks in the meantime. Of course, when something went wrong, we didn't want everything to be rolled back, but we had to know which state the data was in and where we could restart the process. So, of course, it's useful to have some kind of logging. A plain rollback wouldn't appear in your log tables. So what we did was introducing a procedure called PRC rollback, which didn't do much but roll back and actually logging that it was rolling back. And how do you find all the places that you have to change? People who know me, I think, know the answer already. Yes, you should use PL scope if you have it available. It should be on every version after 12.2. It was introduced in 11.1 something, but only from 12.2 onwards it actually knows SQL statements and DDL statements. So we could use that. In that case, we can say select star from user statements, where type in rollback and commit, and then we get all our calls to rollback. And it tells you it's in package control in the package body in line 17, even gives you the column. And so you know exactly where to go and where to do your changes. If you are not on 12.2 or higher, then you do what people have been doing for centuries. Select star from user source and look for rollbacks. There's only one drawback. You get a lot more hits, and sometimes it's quite obvious why. This is a comment. This is a comment. And yes, even this is a comment, but you can only recognize it when you really look into it. So yes, many false positives, but on the other hand, maybe you should do some cleanup anyway. So yeah, everything has its advantages and disadvantages. Wrap your DMS application info calls. Yes, DBMS application info is what you actually see in the $V session table. And here you see we say it's my package, and we're calling great procedure. And when we're done with it, or when we are in the exception, we should set it back to null, because otherwise it would stay on. The only trouble is it doesn't remember the state it had before. So when we say null and go back to the calling procedure, the info is not reset to what the calling procedure set it to. So we need to remember that ourselves. So just keep the values somewhere else so that the calling method can actually set it back to what it was before. So it's useful to set the module and action below the begin statement, to update it in a subtask, and place it again before all end and return statements, so it's actually reset. And don't forget to put it in the exception handlers as well. There is a general recommendation on the internet which says avoid placing instrumentation calls inside loops. I wouldn't put it that way, because as usual it depends. I have a small example. Here you see a procedure called log progress. It uses DBMS application info. It uses the procedure name, and it gets a percentage, a count, how many rows have I processed and how many rows will I process, so the total number. I do some calculations here, like the percentage and some, formatting. And when I call this, I have a statement here which gives me the total number of rows and the current row. The statement gives me around 3,000 lines. And I will put the sessions info on refresh every 5 seconds. And actually it's useful to use a mod function here, so you wouldn't update the progress info with every line, because that really makes it slow, but only, every 10th row. That makes sense. So when I start this, I should have highlighted it. So now it's running, and you see what happens here. In the module, it says it's the grade package and the AMP process, and it has processed 4% of 6% of the whole workload. So while the loop is running, you know what's happening, and your DBA sees, well, the process is not dead yet, it's still running, and it's actually making progress, and you can actually see roughly when it will be finished. yes, my DBA got really excited when he saw me doing it for the first time. He was really happy. Of course, you shouldn't forget to reset it in the end, in the normal end, in the exception part as well. Yes, we can just leave it running. I think you get the idea behind it. So, don't delete your instrumentation code. Yes, I think that can safely be stated, and we're not the only ones. You should also keep it in production and turn it on and off by changing some settings. That's definitely useful, because if something goes wrong in production, yes, it definitely helps you. And there's an extra tip for Apex users, which I actually picked up from Jürgen Schneider. In production, he usually has a very low logging level, but if there's an exception from some user input, for instance, he sets the logging level very high for the next 5 or 10 minutes, because when a user gets an error message, it's very likely that he or she will try it again in the next few minutes. So having a high logging level in the next few minutes is a very useful thing, and you don't have to keep it for ages. Very useful. Yes, actually, this is something that also Tom Kite says. Your code will be easier to tune, and you'll find it easier to maintain over time. Oracle doesn't delete its trace code when shipping its products, and yours should be there too, just in case. And then you should enable it when you need it. Customize your tools. Well, my favorite tool, as some people might know, is SQL Developer. And there is a very nice feature for graying out instrumentation code. Of course, instrumentation code is important, but your business logic is much more important. So you can actually have the instrumentation code grayed out or low-lighted and have the important bits in normal color. Let me just show you how to do it. Are you still running? Okay, gone. Just open a new connection, have some code, and if I use some logger code, just as an example, logger, I don't think they have put line, but it doesn't matter. So, see what happens. SQL Developer realizes, this is instrumentation code, so I will just gray it out or put it to some color that I actually chose. You can configure it yourself. If you go to the preferences, type in syntax, go to PL SQL Logger. That has changed recently. It used to be some cryptic string. So PL SQL Logger, and then you can choose whatever color you want. Maybe you like orange or red or green or gray. Just choose it and it will work. It has several things predefined, logger, DBMS output, and Apex. Here you see it, Apex debug and log. If you want to have PID, for instance, as well, you can just add it here. And it should treat PID lines the same as any other instrumentation code. Okay. So these were the 5 tips from my experience. And now, with the cold and dark season coming up, I put together a reading list When you sit in front of the fireplace, you might want to look into these links to GitHub, where you can get the code, where you can find the documentation. If you're interested in PL Scope, which hopefully you are, you can find some information here. And my last words, please start instrumenting tomorrow if you haven't started already. Make your customers happy and your DBA and yourself. And put all your ideas that actually help DBA and developers work together with this hashtag, DBADev, on Twitter. I would love to read from you. And I think my time's up anyway. I hope, yes, no more questions and answers, but of course you can always contact me via Twitter, email, if you want to know more. And yeah, it was great to see you. It's the normal sentence. It was great to see so many people being online. Take care, and hopefully we'll see each other again in person very, very soon.
Sabine?
Yeah?
Can you hear me? You can answer to a few questions. We have 5 more minutes. No problem.
Okay, good. Yes, first one we had. There's one question, could all this instrumentation be used in Apex also? Yes. As everywhere where you can call PL SQL, you can use these packages. They're all installed in one additional schema, and you can choose where you want the logging output to be. Yes, that works with Apex. Any more questions? I hope the demos weren't too fast. Okay.
If that's it, we can finish. Thank you, Sabine.
All right.
And
Thanks
to
for
other
being here.
attendees, we'll see you on the next topic.